Hello and welcome to the Convey Culture podcast. I'm your host, Bianca Reed, and today we're going to dive into exploring emerging generations, diverse lives, now culture and identity, impact society, career, and business. That's what we talk about every episode, but in this episode, we're going to dive into a little bit more about relationships. And I have a very special guest with me, Tasha Wilson. Tasha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have this experience with you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, me too. So before we jump in, I ask every guest the same question because I think no one knows you better than you. So if you had to describe yourself, introduce yourself to a stranger, a friendly stranger, I always give that caveat because I feel like people, the immediate reaction is stranger. And I'm like, a new person can be a great stranger. So how would you introduce yourself to a stranger? What should we know about you?
Yeah, so it's funny. Whenever I'm asked this question, I'm kind of like, where do I start? Because consistently throughout my life, we may start off as strangers, but then we end up as friends. And so I always say that I never meet a stranger in my life because usually it's my presence that makes them feel calm. Everyone says I have like this warm and nurturing persona, and I'm very approachable. So, like, people will randomly come up to me about stuff. And so, they're usually intrigued. And so, for me, whenever I am connecting with a stranger, I just usually say, "Hey, my name is Tasha. I am often known as a bridge builder. I help bring community together. I'm interested in what you're doing to see how we can like work together, things like that. I'm a mover and shaker." And so, uh, a lot of times it's usually what I'm doing in the present moment or what I necessarily need. And so, um, I always tell people I'm multifaceted. And so what you see one day, you may see another dimension or side of me another day. And so I'm a person that you can't necessarily box in? So, yeah.
And then for in terms of like your career and your journey, I feel like we always give ourselves certain labels, but in terms of your career, professional
Mhm.
journey, you're also an author. Give me a little bit
Yeah.
about you and that portion of your journey as well.
Yeah, so being an author is something that kind of fell in my lap, really. You know how most of the time you're like, I want to do this when I grow up, and I want to, that was never on my radar, to be quite honest. I always thought that, hey, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm okay being in the classroom. I was a child, had these lesson plans and everything. Like, I thought that was the path that I was going to go. And so, yeah, I've taught in a traditional classroom setting, but I know for me, it's more about teaching life
Right.
experiences to other people. And so I do that in my books. And so I've authored 4 books, just finished a fifth one that's
Ooh,
coming out later this year. Um, co-authored 4 publications. So as you can see, I just like live, breathe, and enjoy writing and sharing narratives and really empowering people that I may not necessarily be able to connect with in person. And so my books really are parallels and themes of my life. So dealing with sexual assault trauma, dealing with grief and loss, dealing with self-discovery, identity, figuring out my purpose, and just doing it in such a witty, candid, authentic way, so no matter where you are in your journeys, that you can still find some relevancy in it. And so for me, I honestly would love to just do that for the rest of my life, and just get paid speaking all over the world and, full time, right? And just kind of jump headfirst into entrepreneurship. But I do have a 9 to 5, which is like really rooted and grounded in DEI work. But what really makes me tick and what really gives me a sense of meaning is really being an author.
love that. I think so many, you're right. So many when you're growing up, you're like, I want, how many, I could even tell you, there's so many times I'm like, I should write a book. And the idea that you took that step and made that action. So what about, and you talk a lot about interpersonal topics within your books.
hmm
What kind of set you on that journey to kind of actually get words down on paper? And what was that kind of impetus for you?
Yeah. So, honestly, my father, his loss, right? The loss I experienced, I was 16. It was suddenly tragic, work related incident. And I remember being placed into a grief group in high school. And there's so many things that kind of happen behind the scenes that now looking in it from the social work lens, my mom should have been in contact with, right? And so they placed me in a grief group. My mom had no idea that I was placed in a grief group. So at the age
Well,
of 16, you're trying to figure out who you are, what you're trying to accomplish in life, if that, right? And basically trying to navigate high school. And so then you're coupled with a loss so impactful in public in a small town community. And then they thought that I was actually going to disclose how I felt. No.
no.
So, I shut down. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I already felt like our family was under this huge microscope. So I didn't really trust anyone, especially adults, to say anything. And so the social worker at the time gave me a journal, and she was just like, well, since you're not going to talk to us, maybe you'll talk to the paper. Maybe whatever you write down, that'll help you kind of process things a little bit. And so honestly, it helped. And I had no idea how that would show up in my life years later. And so it was really more of finding a safe haven in paper. I could express how I felt without being judged, without being critiqued, without being ridiculed. And I kept it close to my heart. So it's kind of like, all right, now I kind of release this and I feel good doing that. And so year and a half later, sexual assault happens, and I kind of become withdrawn and retreat. And I'm like, well, I don't really know what to do because I'm still not over the loss of my dad. And now I'm hit with something else just as detrimental. What am I supposed to do? And so I remembered how I felt back in the grief group with the journal. And so I was like, let me go back to a point of reference that was safe and that was familiar with me. And then I started writing again. And so, um, kind of skipping through after going through a series of dead end relationships and kind of self sabotage behavior and realizing that I was kind of exhausted being on this hamster wheel. I had to kind of reframe my thought process to say, okay, how can I relearn who Tasha is before all of this trauma occurred? What was my happy place? What were the things that I actually enjoyed? And not feel guilty about enjoying life again, even though my father is no longer here, or even though I gave this person permission to carry the burden. And sometimes when you are violated, you often take the guilt and shame. It's just the psyche that kind of gets messed up with it. But then how can I gain my power back? And how can I turn my pain into something that's purposeful? And so I said, you know what? If it feels good for me to write and it feels good for me to release my thoughts that way, who else is going through something similar? Who else feels like, this is freeing for them? And so for me, that was a caveat to say, what, let me just try this and see if it works. And it was really just me stepping outside of fear and just taking the risk to see what would happen and what would the outcome be. And the response I got was deafening from the first book. And a lot of people were like, where have you been? We didn't even know you had this gift. What is going on? Oh my gosh. People are now opening up about their own sexual assault trauma and expressing how they felt with grief and really trying to channel that. And I think a lot of times when people see me from the outside looking in, they always like, you're so even keel, you're so reserved. And we had no idea that you actually questioned who you are and how you showed up for yourself because you showed up for everyone else in so many different ways. So that resonated with me. My story, connecting with someone else, giving them the empowerment to move forward.
That's beautiful too. The journey of healing that you went through and then sharing. I think there's times when you're healing and you can get closed off and the fact that you allowed others to probably heal through your story is
Hmm.
always that incredible journey. And when you watch someone, I think it's courageous. I know people use that word lightly, but I do think it's courageous because it's hard. I feel as a Black woman too to sometimes be vulnerable or to be soft or
Hmm.
to acknowledge that you are struggling with anything, let
Hmm.
alone something that, let alone trauma. So how is that? How have you kind of navigated that feeling of even vulnerability and also the reaction that you've seen from others being grateful to you for sharing that vulnerability as well?
Yeah, I will definitely say vulnerability was very scary. And to be quite honest, it still is.
Yeah.
You know, I noticed that as I continue to get older and continue to evolve, there's different layers of vulnerability that I have to pull back.
Yeah.
And with that part of my life, everyone is not necessarily applauding you for it, right? So then you have to deal with people who just want information, not necessarily connecting with you out of concern or being supportive. And so when you take that step to be vulnerable, you have to be open to it also being violated, right? And I know it sounds harsh, but that's the reality because sometimes people will take what you give them and manipulate it, right? And so having those experiences of where I was hurt in the process of being vulnerable, it makes you always question, is it worth it? Is this risk really worth being vulnerable and sharing with people? And so what I had to do was do checks and balances and really look at, let me see who actually benefits from my vulnerability. Let me see who's actually um, feeling courageous to take that next step of getting up out of the bed actually and doing something intentional for themselves. Those are the people that matter. And so really understanding who my audience is because they're the ones that refuel my why. And so that vulnerability state, growing up, to be in full transparency, growing up in a family where I've seen a lot of women who were very strong, who really just kind of suppressed their emotions a little bit because they were caring for everybody else. They were making sure everybody else was good and, just kind of, if I have to deal with my emotions, I'll deal with it later, but never really, right? And so a lot of it wasn't necessarily what they taught verbally, but their actions showed me that. So subconsciously, I picked up on that and I was just like, oh, I'm just going to suppress it. I'm just going to just go through. It's normal. And it's really not. And so now where I'm at in life with vulnerability is the fact that it's okay to be soft. It's okay to let someone support me. It's okay to be open because that desire has always been there to be like, I want somebody to show up for me. I want somebody to be there for me. Being strong is exhausting. I don't have to be superwoman all day long. I tell people I would rather be Lois Lane than, superwoman. Like, let me just be me. and and the people that need to show up for me will. The people who understand my silence or when I start becoming distant, no, okay, let me check in with Tasha. Let me see how she's doing. I don't really need something from her today. I want to make sure that she feels supportive in whatever moment is going on in her life. And so recognizing triggers is important when being vulnerable, but then also being honest with yourself regarding your capacity is important.
And I think we're seeing that. I that was beautiful, just about the whole journey in vulnerability. And I do see a different generation of Black women. I saw this study a couple months ago, and they said depression in Black women does not show up the same way it shows, and you're angry and you have heart problems, and you. And I thought about it, and I'm like, because you are clenching so hard to just surviving and being strong. But
Mm-hmm.
I do see this group of, and I'm in that group of millennial women who I'm like, that is not the life that I want to choose. Like, I don't want to
No.
choose that harshness. I don't want to watch the same narrative about what Black women. I want to see softness and warmth and being cared
Yes.
for and loved and
Mhm.
cherished. I want my daughter to go in the world and feel protected and valuable,
Absolutely.
and that she is worth protecting. And so I think the more we hear stories about that, it changes that narrative, because it's true. Like, I do not want to be superwoman. Like, I don't want to
Mm-mm.
be considered this rock hard super, like,
Mhm.
withstand any pain. No, I see me as human. And I think
Yeah.
that that part is more what I see in our generation. Now, you were, I think also you talked about, you work with, like, your audience does tend to be millennial women, and even navigating relationships and dating. And
Mhm.
so are you seeing more of that desire for softness in our generation, that desire for, and not soft life like I'm seeing on TikTok, but a genuine shift in the
Right.
life?
Softness as far as prioritizing yourself and your well-being.
Right.
Yes. I'm definitely seeing that a lot more, but I also noticed there's a fine line of people who want it, but they're silently saying it, right? It's not until they see someone else step out and say, this is what I want, unashamed, unapologetic, and this is what it is. Then they may chime in or add and be like, yeah, you know what? Me too. That doesn't sound too bad, right? Because when you're so conditioned of doing things one way, it becomes so comfortable that it just is embedded. And so
Yes.
now you're like, okay, I have to unlearn some things. That's tough. Do I really feel like unlearning it, but I always say what you do in the moment um, will always impact what you're doing in the future. And so, why not? Like, it's just try it and see how it works, right? If it's not effective, try a different strategy, try a different approach. But I think what it is, um, I noticed that with millennial women, specifically, that they feel like it's one dimensional. It's a one, two, three step process, and it's really not. Like, it's tailor made to what works for you because we just have to understand our individuality and that we're all wired different. And what may motivate me in terms of my softness may not motivate somebody else. And so being honest, and it really takes a deep dive in doing that intentional inner work. And really recognizing that sometimes for me, I'm like, I'm sorry, but I don't want to be around people all day long. It's exhausting for me. I need to take a pause and recharge my social battery. For others, they get, a thrill off of that. But for me, I'm like, no, I have to find that fine balance. And so boundaries is important with softness. And typically TikTok, Instagram, and all of that make you feel like you're a bad person for choosing boundaries. And I'm like, a boundary is not a barrier. A boundary is a protective measure to ensure that I'm getting what I need before I connect with someone else. Because you never want to project what's going on if you're not dealing with yourself first. And that's just a problem that we always have. We are so quick to project instead of really dealing with the root. And so that's what softness is all about.
I agree. And I think it's also changing to we talked about kind of there's internal and then there's the outward facing piece of it. And I do
Hmm.
think the outward facing is also this work on changing the narrative of how we're perceived. Because in
Absolutely.
relationships, I know so many incredible women who own their own homes and who
Hmm.
have great careers and have chosen not to have children. And the immediate label that goes on them is hard. Like they are hard
Yeah.
women. I'm like, no, they're women who like you don't come with a packaged partner with all of it like that doesn't come delivered to your doorstep. So you have to journey, and that may not even be what you want, but you need to go on this journey of life and be good in your own
Hmm.
skin and good in your own journey. And this idea that you can't have success and progress and softness at the same time is also, I think, something that we somehow
Yeah.
need to break. Like reading that. Have you read the book Black Women Must Die? The title alone, but Black Women Must Die Exhausted. That
No, that
book
is on my list.
good, but then it also like gets under my skin because I'm like, why do we have to? I don't want to like. But part of it was her holding. Anyway, I won't ruin the book, but it's that idea that yes, we can have all. You can have all those things and still be soft and still be open to
Hmm.
a relationship and still be open to something in the future. But that doesn't mean you put your success on pause. And how have you kind
Exactly.
of you see, you know where I'm going with that. How have you felt balancing those two as well?
Yeah, so I'm one of those that I love disrupting people's logic, if you will, because, like, as previously stated, I'm someone that just can't be boxed in. I am so not wired to be the one to color inside the lines. It's just not who I am. And my mom, even like being younger, she would always say, you're a trailblazer, you're a trendsetter, you're someone who doesn't always follow the status quo anyway. And, as a child, you're like, okay, kind of goes in. But then as you get older, you're like, oh, that's what my mom meant. Because for me, I just never been one to follow the crowd, never. And I used to think it was something wrong with me because, a lot of times you have friends who are like, why are you not subscribing to, doing what somebody else is doing? Like, you have the friends who have this timeline, right? Have this discussion. I need to be married by this date. I need to have a child by. I was just never not that person. I'm like, I have a desire to be married. I have a desire to be a mother, but when it happens, it'll happen when it's supposed to versus let me try to check this box and do XYZ. Because one thing that I've learned is trying to find a shortcut to something never turns out okay. Like, I'm a person, I would rather for my food to be cooked thoroughly instead of popping it in a microwave and then it's just prematurely done. That's how I am about my relationships, right? I want to invest in that. And so, um, even as I get older, I notice gems that my father used to share early on. And I'm like, why is he telling me all of this? Because I'm not even thinking about it. But again, life happens the way that it's supposed to, and it makes sense why he had to share these things with me before he passed, right? And so I look at it with relationships with my friends, relationships with looking for, a significant other. What investment is going to be made? Like, are you going to be a liability or are you going to be an asset? Because when you know who you are and what you bring to the table, who you partner with has to add on to that, has to contribute to that. And of course, life has taught me that after having these dead end relationships and just accepting the bare minimum and like being not okay with it. I'm like, mm-mm. Because what I don't want to do is be with the man and feel like I'm mothering him because
Yeah,
that's not my role. That's not the capacity I'm operating in. I need you to be my partner. I need you to be my team player. And so being soft creates that space and that room where it's like, look, I've been doing the heavy lifting at work and dealing with all this. When I come home, I don't feel like doing that. I
right.
feel I need you to take initiative. I need you to, really step in and know um, what my verbal and nonverbal cues are, but you can't do that unless you communicate. And so I
Right.
think usually what happens, the stigma of being soft, right, or getting into this soft era, we just assume that people are supposed to read our minds, and that's not the case. You got to really be vocal about what you want, what you need, and how you're going to show up for yourself and how you're going to show up in these relationships.
True. I think that's such a good point on the partnership, because I
Mhm.
got married young. My husband and I have been married 20 years, almost 18 years, and we got married really young. But it was interesting because people will say like, I want who he is now. And I want to be like, oh no, no, we grew up together. Like we did not
Yeah.
have this. Like I didn't have it together. He didn't have it together. We've learned to be soft with one another. We've
Mhm.
learned to be, and I feel like there's this generation, especially the millennial generation. I call it the waiting to exhale effect, where you're just like expecting, because I feel like everyone's parents were separated and divorced when we grew up. And so
Mhm.
you had this weird expectation. It was like marriage wasn't an automatic. I think it's really interesting when people talk about this
Mhm.
life steps. And I'm like, why do you talk about that like it's a given life step? I didn't know anybody who had a successful marriage growing up. So
Mhm.
like I don't think our generation even saw that a lot. And so this
Yeah.
idea that we are learning love. I still think we are learning how to be a partner in a
Mhm.
society where two people probably have to work, right?
Mhm.
Things are expensive. Two people probably have to work. There needs to be equality in child rearing. There needs to be
Mhm.
equality. Like this isn't we're not 100 years ago or 50 years ago. And I think
Exactly.
we're at a place where we are learning how to do this. So I do feel like both, whatever your relationship partner you like, person you choose, I do
Mhm.
think we give each other grace of this journey, because we are on a journey to learn
Absolutely.
to be soft. I think a lot of men, or whoever you identify as your partner, is also on a journey to figure this out, and it's hard. I think it's really hard. I think we don't give this generation enough grace on how hard it is to navigate that.
Agreed. Agreed. And you know, some of my friends used to look at me strange when I would say, um, for me, I was like, I will know the man that I'm supposed to be with based on one concept. And they were like, what's that? I said, friendship. How
Yeah.
are we as friends, right? Because if my intention is to marry you and my intention is for us to be together for the long haul, we have to have a friendship. Like the same way you get to know platonic friend, it's just like why would you not want that in your partner? And like I can't just say, "Ooh, I like you, you like me, we're attracted to each other, let's do this," right? Especially now where I am in life. Now maybe
Right.
when I was younger, I was like, okay, right? But it's just like been there, done that based off physical attraction and it didn't work, right? And so really making sure that as I get to know him, he's getting to know me and still learning each other as we get older. I think that's very important. And that's why friendship is important because one thing I always say is that marriage is a mirror, and a lot of people don't think of it that
Woo.
way. And it's just kind of like there are going to be things about you that you didn't realize you're still dealing with until you see your partner. That mirror that's like, ooh, okay, hold on. They just rubbed me the wrong way. I'm triggered. And then where's this coming from? Right. So it's like always being able to learn, always being able to hold each other accountable, but then always still being willing to love each other through it and like each other through it, right? That's why the friendship is important. And so for me, I think sometimes with the millennials, we feel like we have to just go all in with working on ourselves, that you can dually work on yourself and still be with someone. It's always,
Yes.
it's like, I need to have option A or B. You can have both, sis. You can
You're
have both.
right on the trigger because you'll be in a relationship, and I completely agree about friendship. If you asked what I think, works and what we is friendship, if you don't have
Hmm.
that, and take your sexuality out of it and just say
Right.
what are your best relationships, and it is the
Hmm.
one truly have a friendship, and you have the space to be yourself, and you have the space to evolve. If you're not
Yes.
friends, you don't get the space to evolve. Like my best girlfriends know that I'm not going to be the exact same person I was in college or in high school.
Exactly.
You should expect that same thing from your partner to understand that you're gonna evolve, but I still
Hmm.
like who you are. Like I like your personality.
Yeah.
If you take that away, people are like, I want to marry someone who has a six pack. Well, guess what? You're not gonna be friends with that six pack forever. Like
Mm-mm. Not at
they
all.
we all want. Yes, they're delightful. But like it's just like it amazes me that I'll see friends with these checklists, and then nowhere on it will be. I want that to be my friend. I'm like, you
Mhm.
have to live in a house with that person every day.
Exactly.
Every day you go on
Exactly.
vacation with them. Every night they're there. You gotta like them a little. Like you really
Right.
gotta like the person.
Because if I don't like you, I don't want to be around you.
No.
If
And
I
then
don't
you have
like the
kids.
energy that you have, I don't want to
Yeah.
be around you.
Right. And if you choose to have kids, I think people forget if you choose to have children, that person will have the personality of the of one of those parents. If
Exactly.
you don't like them, it will make raising a child who is like them. You traumatize that kid, I think, because you're like, you
Mhm.
know, like you remember growing up, or no, I'm not projecting you, but you'll hear
Mhm.
growing up and things. You'll be like, you just like your daddy. That should be a compliment to a child. That should
Thank
not
you.
be an insult.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So it should be like you are just like your dad and he's my favorite person, or you are just like your mom and she's my favorite, or whoever your
Mhm.
caretaker is that we've decided to partner with. That is where I think we forget about friendships. It's like,
Absolutely. And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I was talking to my mom the other day, and it was something I said, and I don't even remember what I said, but she was like, "Oh my gosh, that reminds me of your dad." But it was a compliment, right? And so, because with life, you're dealing with things, right? She didn't expect to be a widow at a young age, but
no,
it's a good thing they were friends also, because what if she couldn't stand him, and then I'm saying something or doing something or even making facial expressions like him, and she would roll her eyes or kind of take her back to a place like,
right.
you don't want to be
No,
the residue of something that's unsettled. And so that's why it's just so important, like you said, especially when you want to have kids, like be intentional with who
yeah,
you
yeah,
decide to partner with.
that'll be your person. That'll
Hmm.
be it. So, but back to your books. Is there any like key nuggets that you would say you want to share that you're like, here's some takeaways that I think are super impactful for that I've learned that you've learned in your journey as well?
Oh yeah. So I'll start with Shatterproof, Refocusing the Lens, because that really talks about the relationship piece, and it really gets to the core of who you are as a person and how your view or perspective of relationships could have changed because of trauma. And so I'm very transparent in that book with talking about how I had to reroute or relearn the essence and the sacredness of relationships, because
Yeah.
after being, a sexual assault survivor, it was distorted my view of what that looks like. But then also in the same breath, empowering others that you are still worthy of the love that you desire. You are still worthy of the healthy relationships, whether that's friends, with a partner, whomever, even family. Because I
Right.
think sometimes we feel like because where someone falls on a family tree that we are required to deal with them. No, you're not. Like, I'm sorry.
Say it
I'm just the
louder. Say
type
it
of
louder for the
person.
people in the back. Like, no, you are not. You're not
Okay,
required.
you I always say there's categories. You have outliers, and then you have people that you can talk to
Yes.
intimately. And so it doesn't matter where these people fall in. And then really reminding people that they're human. And so one of the nuggets in that book is just a constant reminder of you can continually be a work in progress. You are always going to continually heal. It's not like a one-stop shop, but then also realizing that you don't have to be a prisoner of your past neither. Like your past is just a reference point, right? It's helping you, it's reminding you actually of what you've went through and how you're still here surviving it all, and how you're taking that courageous step to really figure out what you want your life to look like, because you're taking back the narrative that you once had created for you. And so really understanding that you have the power to change the trajectory of your life. You have the power to change the outcome of your story, and that you don't have to remain paralyzed on what happened to you that kind of caused you to view things from a negative or deficit way. And so I have tangible tips in there. I have journal prompts, just to kind of do this self reflective piece for people. And then also to let them know that their trauma may be different from my trauma, but it doesn't minimize what they went through. Anything that has impacted you in such a way, it is important for you to address it. But then also, really understanding that you don't have to settle because of the trauma that you've endured. And I think um, socially there has been a disservice, especially for millennial women, to feel like we just have to jump at any chance that we get, and we just have to, settle for whomever is the first to approach us. And that's not the case. You can still be selective, you can still honor your boundaries, and you can still get the life that you deserve and the partnership and relationships that you deserve.
Yes, that one section right there. I just wanted to hold that one part I want to hold because you're right, and I think people forget that everyone only knows their own experience. So this idea that we're adding levels to trauma and we're putting like scorecards again, it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that. It can be something
Mm-mm.
that would seem very minor to someone who's gone through, but it can completely, depending on how they deal with it, can completely change the course of their life and what they're open to. So I
Mhm.
love that you bring that up as kind of like everyone has their own. And I do love a journal prompt. I feel like anytime a book, I was like, give me work to do. How do I get better?
Please, yes.
So,
Yes.
well, then I'm going to jump. We're going to do a little pivot into rapid fire, which feels like a big turn from some of those things. But
Mhm.
first question for you: what's a way you give yourself self care? How do you demonstrate self care?
So to be quite honest, it depends on what I need in the moment. So my self-care is interchangeably. It could be my favorite movie, which is Sister Act 2. I know it like
That feels
line for
like
line. Yeah, it's just the balance of the music, the acting, and then seeing people that are famous now, like early in their careers, is the highlight for me. Um, or taking a nap helps me, because I just do so much um, with my job and with being an author entrepreneur, that just resting is great for me, just uninterrupted sleep. Or for me it is taking myself out to eat. I love it. I love my own company, which is something that
ooh,
socially people shy away from, but I like
I
myself, I love
think
myself, why not?
it's nice too to go out and be able to enjoy and people watch and just or have a book or just listen to
Exactly.
music. Like I don't need to engage in conversation. I just want to enjoy this delicious meal.
Right.
I do. That's the thing. I think also people. I'm like, if you go out on your own, you meet the most fascinating people because you're in a space as well to engage. Because it's hard to go up to someone when they're with a crew or when they're with a group. So
Exactly. Exactly.
I don't know. Whenever I travel for work, I go out to dinner by myself at least one time when I'm there, and you just meet
Mhm.
the most fascinating people by just be brave and go out one time by yourself, and it
Exactly. Yeah, agreed.
good one. Okay, this is another random one. If you could partner with one celebrity that you do a lot of healing work, if you could partner with someone, any celebrity, and would one to collaborate with them, and one celebrity that you'd want to do a project with. So one to collaborate, or one that you get advice. That's a better way to say it. You collaborate.
Hmm. One that I would love to collaborate with, and I smiled so hard because I just love her. Angela Bassett. That is like my favorite actress. Like she's just so confident in who she is. She doesn't compromise who she is to do the work that she does. And the fact that she has this balance of being human first and then knowing that the work that she does is an extension of who she is. So I would love to collaborate with her, especially on like maybe a mentorship project for
Mm.
like younger women, Generation Z and so forth, to really start early with allowing them to view themselves as valuable, view themselves as worthy, because it's easy to talk down on yourself, but to really live out loud and have that action behind what we're teaching would be great. And I do know she has like a special place in her heart for the younger generation. So that'd be a great collaborative effort. I think someone to help, right? That's what you said,
Or get
to
advice. Yeah.
get advice from. I would say to get advice from. Right now, I would say Auntie Tabitha Brown.
Ooh, oh,
And I
no, what was
say
in the room?
that, yeah, like one thing I love is that she handles everything with so much grace, because it's easy to get caught up in the critics and the noise, especially when you're doing things in such an unconventional way. And you are just like, this is who I am. This is what I'm supposed to do. It may not be popular to you, but I know what's important and vital to me. Um, every time when she's being interviewed and people are trying to get her caught up to respond negatively to people, she does not. And I love her stance on being true to herself and not getting immersed into drama. So just that graceful poise and that nature, I love it. Like that is someone I would absolutely get advice from. Especially because what she has going on in her life is something that I desire to get to that level. Like give me a New York best-selling times. Like, let me be on bigger stages than I've already been on. Like, how did you get through that? What did you do? Taking that leap of faith and saying, you know what? I'm going to allow my husband to retire. So I'm in a position.
I loved how she approached that when people came at her about it too. She was like, "No, you
Okay.
don't know. You don't know our story, my story."
Right. Please and thank you. And so I want to be at a point in my life where um I can say to my mom, "Hey mom, your house is paid off. You don't have to worry about it." You know what I mean? And so really seeing what was her thought process behind the scenes, the stuff that we don't see. What did you do? How did you set yourself up for that? How did you prepare for that? And so really getting advice from her would be great.
Incredible. I know that's one of those. Just if I could just get a meeting with you, and she is a beautiful soul.
Yeah.
For this next one, what
Hmm.
are the three least likely words someone would use to describe you? So the least likely ones.
Least likely. Mm, I would say I'm laughing because I'm like thinking of the words that people always say to describe me.
I
So
don't know
the
what are the
opposite of
opposite.
that, the opposite would be insecure.
Yeah.
They would not describe me as that. Um, another one is center of attention. And but from a negative standpoint, because I'm the type of person who would not want the spotlight on me. I'm just kind of like, we're a whole crew. What are we doing? Um, and I'm very imperative of being inclusive. So I think that, and then another word, selfish.
Yeah.
I am like one of the selfless giving people ever. That to the point. Well, here we go with this softness.
See?
Because I give so much, really allowing people to give to me. Yeah.
Right. Those are beautiful ones. So I like those
Thank
three.
you.
It's always, I just find it fascinating, everyone's answer, because when you ask someone how you want them to describe themselves, they come up with these very like defined things. And I love the reverse, because you see, back to our topic about vulnerability, you
Hmm.
see a little bit about how they see themselves internally. And that was a beautiful reflection. Okay, what are your favorite content sources? We talked about TikTok and social media. What's the kind of thing that everyone has? Like, I'm a diehard audiobook addict. I listen to more than anyone should in a week, probably. But what are your things that kind of hook you in? What's the content? And I love social media, so let me be quiet.
Yeah, I love audio books as well. And it's so funny because I'm learning that about myself now. I've always been put me in Barnes and Nobles, I'll stay there all
Yeah.
day and get a tangible book. But sometimes you just want to listen. Like if you're just doing other things or just you don't feel like picking up the actual book and reading it. So it's nice, the
Mhm.
audiobook. And then for me, because the audiobook makes it seem like a movie because I'm very visual. So I like that part about it. Social media is a double-edged sword. It's so funny because the work that I do is so public, but yet I'm so private. And
Right.
so it challenges me to step out of what's comfortable. And so I do like that, but I also like that it gives me the platform to be consistent in my authenticity because a lot of people just post highlight reels and I'm kind of like, no, like this is who I am. I'm a person first. And so I love that. Um so for me, it's typically Instagram. So I'm an aunt, and so my older nieces are on TikTok. So no, thank you. I was like, nope, nope, nope. But Instagram is pretty cool because I can just kind of post and then go about my business. Facebook, it depends. I like the interaction, but I feel like sometimes on Facebook, people feel entitled to have the liberty to just
Ooh,
yeah, not scroll and
great.
mind their business. It's
Yeah.
just like you don't have to respond to everything. It's okay. If you don't agree, that's fine. Just keep scrolling.
Isn't it the worst? I will like they talk about I will like I don't I unlike you as a human after seeing things you do on
Exactly.
see that person. I'm like I don't know, like you seem cool in person, but I unlike you on whatever you do. Like I just can't. I have questions about who you are now because
Exactly.
you really like. I'm like I would have never thought you were someone who would get your fingers busy to treat someone like that. So it is
Exactly.
unsettling almost sometimes the things you see on Facebook. You're like, what?
Absolutely.
I know. I do love the groups though. How now you can be part of a group of a certain like something
Mhm.
will interest you, but then same thing. I'm like, who? Why did you get your fingers warmed up for violence today? What are you doing on the
Right.
internet?
And then wake up early to start it.
I
Like,
know.
did you think
Like,
about
what
this
are
all
you drinking
night?
in the
Like,
morning? What gasoline? What is that? You like? I just
right.
meet them in person. I'm like, I know you. Why would you? I think people have an alter
Exactly.
ego or something on the internet.
Agreed.
Agreed. So if you could devote your life to the rest of your life to a like philanthropic cause, like one cause that just would resonate with your soul, and you're rich, so you don't need to worry about the financial implications of this. What would you focus on?
Absolutely maternal health. Um, And so, of course, in our community, there's this uptick, right, of a whole bunch of complications, I'll say it that way, that become undiagnosed for so many years. And we have to advocate for ourselves um, in terms of our body. Like, we know how we feel, we know if something's going on. And um, for me, this actually be the first time I've said it publicly. I mean, the people that I know, of course, that are close to me know this, but I remember at the age of 14, and I was like, something's not feeling right. And I remember talking to my mom about it. And so we would go to the doctors, you know how you have the annual checkups and things like that. And they just was like, oh, her body's changing. It's okay, and pushing through. And then we revisit it in my 20s, and they're like, no, it's just hormones, right? At the age of 30, I was officially diagnosed with fibroids. And my mom was like, she's been telling you this for years, and generationally, the women in my family have had it. So my mom knew the symptoms, the signs, all of that. And so, really dealing with that for as long as I have, even after the diagnosis, right? And I'm like, it's a shame that we get dismissed, even when we're advocating for ourselves, and it gets exhausting after a while to keep advocating. And so, when there's not a lot of support groups, about this, and you're thinking, hey, do you deal with this too, or how does it make you feel? And then you're realizing subconsciously you're trying to adjust to having fibroids and trying to figure out how to navigate that. Because I know for me, which is why I was like, here's another layer of vulnerability. It caused me to switch up like some of the clothes that I'd wear because you're feeling self-conscious. Your body is now reacting, and you just don't want to have an embarrassing moment, or now you're gaining extra weight and people are not understanding why, but in certain areas, because I've always had a small frame my whole life, and so that's how we knew something was going on. I was like, okay, and it's coming at a rapid speed, and really educating ourselves on it. So maternal health would be very important because we need to see how that also connects with women who actually want children, and then having that support team once you have children. Let's talk about a doula. Let's talk about the importance if you even want to have a home birth. Those kind of things that we don't realize we have at our fingertips to discuss because a lot of spaces are not created for us to share these things. So for me, maternal health is really big because I don't want anyone else to sit here either suffer in silence and try to normalize this when it's not normal. No one should be living in discomfort. And then really figuring out how do I get access to these things. And so creating, like, as important as we started talking about mental health and having this whole directory for people to contact therapists, we need to have the same thing when it comes to our physical health, and really prioritizing that. And so I'm a person that lives out loud, and so I recently connected with the White Dress Project and serving as a volunteer with them. And I'm a person that if this is my experience, I'm going to help someone else out. I'm very candid on finding ways to ensure that someone else is not suffering in silence like I had before. And so, um, really letting them know what their options are too, I think is important. And so, really getting to a point in my life now where I'm okay with saying this is what's going on, this is how I'm addressing it, and so forth. So,
It's wild though, because it's not uncommon. Both sides, I've dealt with both sides of every aunt on both sides have had
mhm,
fibroids. For it to be this common, and then you saw the lawsuit about hair perms, and I'm like,
exactly.
this common, and no research to really be done into it. No help. I
Right.
mean, common to the point where both sides of my family, everyone has had surgery to remove fibroids, and
Mhm.
it's been ignored. So it's this story of it not being unique, and we've done other podcast episodes about maternal health, and it is absolutely insane to me how you would almost be safer going to another country and having a baby than having one here at times because of the
Seriously.
amount of I mean, Serena Williams is a millionaire and couldn't get great maternal health. And you're just thinking to yourself, like, what are we doing? Like
Exactly.
what are we doing? Like this cannot be. So more scholarships for Black women in healthcare, more scholarships on
Absolutely.
research and education, more investment in research and education in the space, more working on unbiased health practitioners, all of those
Yes.
like your health books have been teaching you one thing, and the idea that we don't feel pain the same. I can't tell you how many doctors have been like, but you don't feel you're. And I'm like, what does my skin color have to do with how I feel pain? Like, who told you all this? Like, it's just
Exactly.
where did you get this information? Where have you studied this from? This to our theme of softness. Yes,
Mhm.
softness in maternal health care, right? Like softness in that experience. So it can be a
Absolutely.
beautiful experience, not a terrifying experience. Like
Exactly.
for that. Well, this has been incredible. I want you to tell everyone where to find you, where to find your books, where to just soak up more of your goodness at, all of those things.
Sure. So my website is a one-stop shop, www.lifewithtashaw.com. There you can learn more about what I do, how to partner with me. I'm always open to doing community activism, being a part of causes, speaking engagements, even doing like an author talk series. I'm open to all of that. Um, you can find my books on there. So if you want an autographed copy, the best way is to get it from my website. But I'm also on Amazon too. So we all know with Amazon Prime, if you want it a lot faster, you can get it from there. And all of my books are listed there. On Amazon, you just look up my name, Tasha M. Wilson, and it'll all populate there. On Instagram, Life with Tasha W _ is a great way to follow me. And then on Facebook, I have a group, Tasha W Messenger of Hope.
Love it. I'll have all of that down below. I say down below. It'll all of it. That'll be where it's supposed to be, so you can find it and promote it. Well, this has been such a beautiful experience talking to you. I told you I was going to try to keep it to 30, and we just went in and got to talking. But I feel like when you have a beautiful vibe happening, when you're having healing conversations, sometimes healing just needs to take its course. So
Right.
thank you so much for being a guest. For all of you who are listening, don't forget to like, subscribe, engage. Let us know how you feel. Comment, are these topics that are relevant to you, but also what have been in your experience on your softness and healing journey, and kind of looking at your whole self and how you want to put that out in the world. So thank you so much, Tasha, for being on the podcast. You have been an absolutely wonderful guest.
Thank you so much.